She caught my wrist before I could turn off the last light. Just that, her fingers brushing against me, not even a full grip, and I forgot what I was doing. The studio had gone quiet, only the faint hum of the air conditioning filling the space, but in that silence her touch landed like a question I wasn't ready to answer. Her name was Clara. Mid-40s, elegant in a way that seemed unstudied, as if Grace had simply decided to take residence in her bones. She was my dance instructor, though to call what she did teaching always felt too small. Every correction, every tilt of her chin when she watched me, every time she pressed her palm lightly to my shoulder to guide me, it was more than instruction. It was presence. I stood there, 20-something and awkward in my own skin, holding my breath. The smell of polished wood and faint perfume wrapped around me. She leaned slightly, reaching past me to slide the bolt across the studio door. Her arm brushed mine, warm through the thin fabric of my shirt, and I swear I felt my pulse in places I didn't know had a rhythm. "You're getting better," she said finally, her voice low but steady. Not praise exactly. Something closer to an invitation. I nodded too quickly. "Only because you—" I stopped. Words threatened to spill out, clumsy, too much, and I bit them back. She tilted her head, waiting, but I let the silence sit heavy between us. Her eyes lingered on me a moment too long. The overhead lights left them glimmering, but it wasn't the brightness I noticed. It was the pause in them, as if she were measuring whether to step closer or step away. I rubbed the back of my neck, suddenly aware of how young I must look to her, sweat still drying at my collar, hair sticking to my forehead. She, in contrast, was composed, a loose sweater falling off one shoulder, exposing skin that looked too soft for how many hours she spent in studios like this. "You rushed the last steps," she said, breaking the silence. Her tone was gentle, but her gaze fixed on me like she wanted to see past the excuse she knew I'd give. "I don't mean to." My voice came out thinner than I wanted. She smiled faintly. "That's the point. Don't mean. Just move." The words should have been instructional. Yet they hung in the air between us differently, heavier. She didn't look away, not even when I tried to. My chest tightened, not from the dancing, but from the weight of being studied like that, not as a student, not as a boy fumbling through steps, but as if I were something worth noticing. I shifted, my hand brushing hers again on the door handle. Neither of us moved it away. My throat went dry, and I caught myself leaning in without realizing. "Clara." Her name slipped out softer than I intended. Her lips parted, just slightly, as though she'd been waiting to hear it. She didn't answer right away. Her hand tightened imperceptibly over mine, and I felt the quiet thrum of her pulse against my skin. The room seemed to narrow, the mirrors reflecting only the two of us, the floor holding the faint echo of music we'd long stopped playing. She was so close I caught the warmth of her breath when she finally leaned in. And then the studio door rattled. A key scraped in the lock from the other side. Her hand flew back, her composure snapping into place. My own pulse stuttered, caught between the closeness we almost crossed into and the sharp sound of someone about to enter. The bolt was still half drawn. The key in the door never turned. Whoever it was must have realized the studio was locked and left, but the sound had already shifted something. Clara and I stood frozen, a breath too close to one another, until she stepped back and smoothed the edge of her sweater like nothing had happened. "Late," she murmured, almost to herself. "We should go." But she didn't move toward the lights or her bag. She stood there in the dim studio, her reflection and mine stretched across the wall of mirrors, making it look like there were more of us than there really were, versions of me leaning toward versions of her, caught in a dance either of us had practiced. I bent to pick up my jacket, buying time. My hand shook as I pretended to fuss with the zipper. "Clara." I tried again, her name still strange and warm in my mouth. She looked at me, and for a moment her confidence faltered. I'd seen her command entire rooms before, correcting dancers twice my age with nothing but a raised eyebrow. But now her gaze softened, and something else showed through. Not fragility exactly, but weariness. "Don't," she said quietly, though I hadn't asked anything yet. I straightened, jacket hanging limp in my hand. Don't what? She pressed her lips together, then shook her head with a small smile that wasn't really a smile. You don't know what you're doing. Maybe she was right. I was 23, clumsy in ways I couldn't hide. I hadn't had many serious relationships. The last one ended with a text that said she wanted someone more certain, less searching. Clara carried certainty in her very posture. Even standing still, she looked like music was running under her skin. But in her eyes now, there was something else. Something like loneliness, or maybe regret. I took a breath. Then tell me what I'm doing. She laughed, soft but sharp. You're trying to play at being older than you are. And I. She stopped herself, glanced down at the floor. Her fingers toyed with the strap of her dance bag, twisting it once, then again. And you? I pressed gently. Her eyes flicked up to mine. The air between us shifted again. She didn't answer, but she didn't move away either. The silence felt heavier than any words. My chest ached with it. I turned toward the door, meaning to give her space, but she reached out and touched my shoulder. Just a touch, the weight of her palm resting there, firm yet trembling ever so slightly. You remind me, she said softly, almost too low to catch, of what it was like before everything became complicated. Her hand lingered, warm through my shirt. My breath stalled. I wanted to ask what she meant, about complications, about the shadow that crossed her face, but she pulled her hand back before I could. The age gap hung unspoken in the air. She was mid-40s, accomplished, the kind of woman who carried herself with history. I was barely figuring out who I was outside of other people's expectations. What would people think if they knew I stayed behind with her after class, long after the music stopped? Still, when she turned away, I found myself stepping closer instead of leaving. The scent of her shampoo, something faintly floral, not sweet but grounding, brushed against me as she adjusted her bag. You hide it well, I said quietly. She stiffened. Hide what? That you'd get lonely too. Her eyes widened just slightly, and for a moment I thought I'd gone too far. But she didn't scold me, didn't laugh it off. She just let the silence stretch, her chest rising slowly with each breath. Then, almost imperceptibly, her hand brushed mine as she reached for the light switch. It wasn't an accident. The soft graze of her fingers lingered just long enough to be felt, then slipped away. The studio went dark, except for the faint lights spilling through the windows. In that dim glow, we stood facing each other, either moving to leave. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, she reached forward again, her knuckles grazing my arm, not bold, not certain, but undeniably there. The touch was fleeting, but it left a current running under my skin. And when she finally whispered, "Let's go," her voice carried something unsteady, something that made it impossible for me to believe we were just walking out into the night like teacher and student. We left the studio together, but the echo of her hand on mine followed me like a secret I wasn't ready to let go of. The next evening, I stayed after class again. I told myself it was to practice, to work on the last sequence that kept tripping me up, but I knew the real reason. Clara didn't send me away. She lingered too, correcting my stance with the soft pressure of her hand at my ribs, guiding my arm until it matched hers. Each touch was light, professional on the surface, but beneath it, my chest tightened as if the air itself had grown too thin. "You're still rushing," she said, her voice low. "I know," I admitted, catching her eyes in the mirror. Her gaze held me there. The studio felt hushed, like it was waiting for something neither of us wanted to name. Then a knock. The door creaked open, and one of the other instructors poked his head inside. "Clara? You still here?" She dropped her hand instantly, stepping back as though burned. "Yes," she called, her tone brisk. "Just finishing up." The man's eyes landed on me, curious. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Clara crossed her arms, blocking the line of sight between us. "We'll lock up." He nodded slowly, then disappeared, the door clicking shut. The silence that followed was deafening. "You should go," she said finally. But I didn't move. "You don't mean that." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she pressed her fingers to her temple, as if trying to will away whatever was pulling her closer. "It isn't appropriate," she said at last. The word stung. Appropriate. I wanted to laugh, to ask her when anything worth wanting had ever been safe. But I didn't. I just took one step closer, then another. "Do you really care what they think?" I asked softly. Her breath caught. She looked at me, then away, then back again. "You're young," she said, almost accusing. "And you're not," I countered, my voice steadier than I expected. The tension between us crackled, too alive to ignore. She shook her head, but her feet didn't move. "You'll regret it," she whispered. "Then let me." Her chest rose sharply. I thought, no, I knew, she almost leaned in then. The space between us narrowed, her perfume brushing against me, her hand hovering at my sleeve. But she stopped. I could feel the pull, the way her body angled toward mine against her better judgment, the way her eyes kept flicking to my mouth before snapping back up. My heart thundered so loud I was sure she could hear it. Seconds stretched. Neither of us breathed. And then, merciful or cruel, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound cut through everything. I fumbled to silence it, but the spell was broken. Clara turned away sharply, pacing toward the mirrors. I wanted to curse whoever had messaged me, wanted to throw the phone across the room. But when I looked at her reflection, I saw more than frustration. I saw fear. She pressed her palm to the glass, staring at herself instead of me. "We can't," she murmured. I moved closer, stopping just behind her. Our eyes met in the mirror. My hand lifted, almost of its own will, and hovered near her shoulder. I didn't touch, not quite. Just close enough that the heat of her skin reached mine. Her breast shuddered. She didn't step away. "We shouldn't," she said again, but softer this time, as though the word itself had lost conviction. My hand lingered there in the space between us, trembling with restraint. She closed her eyes, as if giving in for just that moment. The mirrors showed the truth we couldn't say out loud, two bodies drawn together, caught between hesitation and inevitability. Neither of us moved. And that stillness felt more intimate than any kiss could have been. I didn't plan to stay late again, but when the last student left and Clara lingered by the piano, stacking sheet music into neat piles, I found myself unable to walk out the door. Something in the way her shoulders curved forward, just a little, like she was carrying more than choreography, pinned me there. "Why do you always stay?" she asked suddenly, not looking at me. Her tone was sharp, but it cracked around the edges. The words rushed out before I could stop them. "Because I want to be near you." Her hands froze on the music. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she turned slowly, her eyes catching mine like she'd been waiting to hear it, and dreading it in the same breath. "That's not—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do." My voice came out steadier than I felt. My palms were damp, my pulse loud in my ears. She shook her head, laughing softly, not amused but nervous. "You're half my age. People would—" Her voice trailed, as though even she couldn't finish the thought. I stepped closer. "Let them." Her breath caught. She finally looked at me, really looked, as if trying to memorize every line of my face. I felt it, the way she wanted to pull back but couldn't, the way something inside her had already tipped past the point of reason. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I've made mistakes before. I can't." "Then make this one," I said, and the words hung between us, reckless, bare. Her body swayed toward mine before she caught herself. I saw the battle flicker across her face, fear, longing, shame, all at once. I lifted my hand, slow enough to give her time to stop me. She didn't. My fingers brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. Her skin was warm, impossibly soft. The small tremor in her breath when I touched her nearly undid me. "Don't," she said, but her voice was so quiet, so unconvincing, that it sounded more like a plea to continue. My hand lingered at the side of her face, thumb grazing her jaw. She leaned into it, barely, but enough. The world shrank to the space between us, the faint music still humming from a speaker we'd forgotten to turn off, the smell of wood polish and perfume, the heat of her body inches from mine. "You'll ruin me," she murmured. "No," I said, my voice low, closer now, near her ear. "You'll save me." Her eyes closed. She leaned forward, and I felt the brush of her breath against my lips. Everything in me screamed to close the distance, to finally taste what had been building for weeks. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. Her hand rose, fingers grazing my chest, clutching lightly at my shirt like she needed to anchor herself. "Clara!" I breathed her name, and she exhaled like she'd been holding it in all night. Her lips were a whisper away from mine when a sudden slam echoed from the hallway. The outer studio door had shut, loud and jarring. We froze, inches apart, eyes wide, every nerve alive. She pulled back just enough to breathe, but not enough to let go. Her forehead leaned against mine, her hands still fisted in my shirt. "This can't keep happening," she whispered, though her body didn't move away. I swallowed hard. "Then stop me." She didn't. We stood there, caught between danger and desire, on the trembling edge of a kiss that would change everything. The slam of the outer door should have been a warning, but neither of us moved right away. Her forehead rested against mine, her breath brushing over my lips in uneven bursts. The world was narrow to the sound of our breathing, to the thrum of my pulse under her hand. Then, from the hallway, footsteps. Voices. Clara jerked back, her hand slipping from my shirt as though it burned her. She turned sharply, clutching her bag with trembling fingers. "We need to," she started, but before she could finish, the studio door cracked open. It was Marissa, one of the younger instructors, her phone still in her hand. She paused in the doorway, eyes darting between us. "Too long. Far too long." Sorry," Marissa said, her tone light but probing. "Didn't know anyone was still in here." Clara's composure snapped into place so quickly it felt rehearsed. "We were just finishing," she said, cool and brisk. But I saw Marissa's eyes flick to my flushed face, to the way I stood too close, jacket half off like I'd been caught mid-motion. Her gaze lingered. Then she smirked, small, sharp, before slipping out again, the door clicking shut. Silence fell heavy. Clara dropped her bag onto the bench, pressing both hands over her face. "God! She didn't!" I started. "She did!" Her voice was muffled, strained. "She saw enough." I stepped closer, wanting to steady her, but she held up a hand to stop me. "Don't." Her body shook once, a tremor she tried to mask. I'd never seen her this undone, not Clara, who moved with certainty, who held herself like she owned the air in any room. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If people talk—" I swallowed, trying to ignore the heat still coursing through me. "Let them." Her head snapped up, eyes flashing. "It's not your name on the studio. It's not your reputation." Her words stung, but behind the sharpness I saw something raw. Fear. Shame. A history I didn't know. "You've done this before," I said quietly, before I could stop myself. Her lips parted, then closed again. She turned away, pacing toward the mirror. Her reflection wavered in the dim light, her hand clutching the bar so tight her knuckles whitened. "Once," she admitted finally, her voice breaking. "Years ago. I thought it was different. I thought I was different. And when it ended, it nearly destroyed everything I'd built." I froze. She'd never told me anything personal before. The weight of it pressed into the room, heavier than the silence that followed. "I promised myself," she continued, shaking her head. "Never again." She looked at me in the mirror then, eyes wide, shimmering with something like regret. I felt it in my chest, sharp and unsteady. This wasn't just about me. It was about a promise she'd been clinging to, a scar she hadn't let heal. But when I stepped closer, she didn't move away. My hand hovered near hers on the bar, not touching, just close enough that she could feel the heat. "I'm not him," I said softly. Her shoulders trembled. "No. You're worse." The words landed like a challenge. I should have pulled back, but instead I edged closer until our arms brushed. The faintest contact, yet it sent a current tearing through me. She turned, suddenly, and we were face to face. Her breath hitched, mine matched it. For a second, I thought she'd kiss me just to silence the storm between us. Instead, she pressed her palm flat against my chest, holding me at that fragile distance. I could feel her pulse racing under her skin. "You make me want to break every rule I set for myself," she whispered. I leaned in, my voice low at her ear. "Then break them." Her hand tightened against me, but she didn't push me away. Not this time. The studio was dark around us, but in that moment it felt like the only light left in the world was the fire burning between us. Clara closed her eyes, her lips parting like she was about to speak, or kiss me, and then, with a shudder, she whispered, "Tomorrow. Meet me after class." She pulled away, quickly, before I could answer. Bag in hand, she slipped out the door, leaving me alone in the echoing studio with nothing but her scent on the air, and the promise of something that could ruin us both. The studio was empty again, but this time the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt waiting. I sat on the bench by the mirrors, heart beating like it had all week, ever since Clara had whispered, "Tomorrow." I'd replayed it in my head every night, wondering if she would change her mind, if fear would swallow her resolve. The door clicked open. She slipped inside quietly, as if the world outside had no business following her in. A scarf hung loose around her neck, her hair falling in a soft curtain she hadn't bothered to pin back. She looked less like my instructor, more like someone I wasn't supposed to see, and yet had been waiting for all along. "You came," I said, standing before I thought better of it. She gave a small, almost nervous smile. "I wasn't sure if I would." I stepped closer. "I wasn't sure either." For a moment, we just stood there, close but not touching. The air buzzed between us. "I've spent so long building walls," she said finally. "Convincing myself I didn't need this." Her hand lifted vaguely, as if gesturing to the space between us, the invisible thread that had kept tightening. "And you?" Her voice faltered. She shook her head, laughing softly at herself. "And me?" I asked. Her eyes met mine, steady now. "You make me forget the walls are there." I reached for her hand, slow enough to let her pull away. She didn't. Our fingers brushed, then laced together, warm and trembling. I could feel the tiniest tremor in her grip, but she didn't let go. "I'm not asking you to be fearless," I said quietly. "Just to let me be here. With you." Her breath caught, and then she stepped forward until her forehead rested against my chest. The simple weight of her there undid me more than any kiss could have. I held her, arms wrapping around her shoulders, the world falling silent except for the sound of her exhale against me. We stayed like that, suspended. The mirrors caught us, not student and instructor, not halves of different generations, just two people holding on to something fragile and real. After a long pause, she tilted her face up. "You realize how complicated this could get?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Everything worth it usually is." Her eyes softened, and for the first time I saw no hesitation there. Only warmth, steady and unguarded. When she leaned up, I met her halfway. The kiss was gentle, unhurried, not a breaking point, not a storm, but an arrival. Her lips were soft, certain. My hand cupped the back of her neck, hers tightened at my shirt, and for that moment nothing else mattered. When we finally pulled apart, she laughed under her breath, the sound lighter than I'd ever heard it. "God, you're going to be trouble." I grinned. "The good kind, I hope." Her thumb brushed my hand, slow circles grounding us both. She shook her head, smiling now, not at me but with me. We sat down on the bench together, side by side, our shoulders pressed close. No need for explanations, no rush into the future. Just the quiet certainty of being there, together, in the stillness of the studio where it had all begun. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I rested my cheek against her hair. Our fingers stayed intertwined, steady, unshaken. And for the first time since it started, it didn't feel like a risk. It felt like something we had already chosen,